Hello, everybody. And yeah, if you listened to last week's episode, you will be aware that I have considered doing more like specific intros for each episode each week, introducing the film and sort of teasing things that might happen in the episode. And I also in this episode discuss potential changes that could come to the podcast. So I might cover more TV shows or video essays or that kind of thing going forward. So this week's episode will be covering the Contrapoints video essay Opulence. Enjoy! Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and this week I am joined by Brad again after a very long hiatus of between episodes.
Oh, yes, it has been a while. Thank you for inviting me back, actually.
Yeah. So this week is going to be a bit different. I usually do like well, not to say that these aren't film. This isn't a film exactly. It's a bit different. It's a documentary more or less, right? I'd classify it.
I'd call it a video essay is
A
probably more
video. It's a
accurate.
yeah. Um. So this is going to be yeah. I don't know how many people will be interested in this. Uh, we will be discussing. I think it will be a broader discussion, of course, but mainly we'll be talking about the video essay Opulence by Contrapoints, which was what you suggested we do, and I thought it might be interesting to try out a different thing. Might expand what I cover on here. Might do more video essays. Might do more maybe TV shows, that kind of thing as well. I might sort of expand out into more video format beyond just films.
Yeah, I mean, I think Natalie or ContraPoints,
Mm.
she has a very dynamic style of video essays. I basically I exclusively watch video essays now. I haven't watched a movie in over a year and a half, actually.
Jesus,
Um,
that's a long time.
it is. I've been watching video essays basically exclusively, and I think in terms of film language,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff, I think like Natalie's videos are insane.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I'm gonna sort of give my limited history and knowledge of ContraPoints. I've been aware of her for a little while. Some There's people who who cover um ContraPoints, and when she gets cancelled, occasionally by the internet, by
Twitter,
Twitter.
Big Sag, yeah,
Yeah,
Doc Angel stuff. Let's go.
yeah. And I've seen some of the videos she did on J.K. Rowling and her transphobic comments, but I haven't seen a lot of her work until this. This is like the first full essay of hers that I've watched through it, and it's pretty it was pretty good actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think Opulence and
Mm.
Envy, which is her most recent one, is probably two of her videos that I think really stand out in terms of like how the hell did she do this sort of thing? Like
Yeah.
this is not like a very this is not a multi-million dollar studio,
No.
um and it does come across as like what you'd expect from like a multi-million dollar production in a way. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting. It was yeah. It was very well in sort of technical aspects. It was very well put together. Like the editing was very nice. Cinematography, the set design, costume design as well was also very out there, and it's very well written as well. She was very well spoken and had a lot of interesting points that she made, and I guess a lot of this I'm just gonna say will not be as much of me talking. It'll be a lot of Brad explaining things and going through it due to his more you're a lot more familiar with her work.
yeah, and I mean I'm a lot more familiar with the topics as well, I would assume.
Yeah,
Um, Given that this is content I watch on the daily
Yeah,
as opposed to watching movies and stuff. So
yeah. Like in terms of it because this is going to be a very politically sort of themed episode, so I keep up to date with a lot of major things, like, oh, if there's controversy with the president or the PM or these major politicians, or I keep up, there's these new bills that people want to try and pass through, but that either will or won't, and some obviously won't because of the ludicrous nature that of what they stand for essentially, and sometimes it's interesting to sort of look at these political views, and because I wouldn't say I have like a specific leaning. Like, I wouldn't say I lean more on the left or the right. I definitely have, like, I'm sort of open to stuff, but I feel like anybody who does say that clearly has like a specific side they do land on, though.
yeah, well, I mean, uh, Natalie is I believe a socialist. Like she talks about Marx and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a socialist. I'm left wing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But you're not like democratic because of your
I'm an
perceived
anarchist, so
anarchist. Yeah,
technically I'm the most democratic.
the most. Yeah.
The most, but that's not really what the video is about. It's more
No, yeah,
the philosophy of opulence and
yeah.
how opulence is used as a tool by the rich and powerful, how it
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, um, and how it's also a video that focuses a lot on queer culture, on like
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
culture of LGBT people, culture of people of color as well.
yeah.
It's a lot of
The
great
yeah,
points.
yeah. So I guess sort of a general, sort of explanation of this, because I've like literally just finished it like a few minutes, like 10, 15 minutes ago. So my thoughts are still a bit like not everything sort of connected, but it's split up into several chapters going through all these different topics that are all related to opulence and the sort of idea of it, of these of wealth basically, and the use of it by people and stuff like that is
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Mm,
And it's very consistent with her
mm,
style. She often likes to
mm-hmm.
do the sort of chapters thing and then have like a title screen for each chapter and sort of like
Yeah.
uh music in the background, which I think the music for Opulence was also very on point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but I wanted to get your opinion on something now. I'm a
Yep.
huge fan of bisexual lighting. The
Mm.
pink and blue is
Oh
it's
yeah.
such an amazing aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the opening shot of this film
Yeah.
is heavily plays into that. It's all
Mm.
basically bisexual lighting, but like
Yeah.
the opening shot really exacerbates it. It's pink versus blue,
Yeah.
and then it's such an opulent image. What did you think about that first image?
Um, I thought that, like, I guess this sort of goes into like a more general point, but I thought in terms of looking, I thought it was very, it was very, pretty and very nice looking in it, and it definitely it stands out. It's not, it's because it's all this color, and so it's sort of, and it's stuff that like in the color, it's very much like, I don't really know how to describe it's I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I feel
Well, it's bisexual lighting,
yeah,
probably. It's just like it's just got that vibe. It's
yeah, yeah. It's just like
and
it's just very, it just looks very nice, just like the two sort of contrasting colors together and sort of setting everything up, I guess, to sort of, like, is this a thing in her other video essays, where that like the opening shot sort of kind of sets the tone for what it's going to be about, or like, is this
oh
like a
yeah,
common thing?
definitely. I think and Contrapoints out of all the um video essayists, mostly on the left,
Mm.
she's the one I think who can nail the visual style consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and and her opening shots, for example, the one I can think of off the top of my head would be Envy, which is her most recent one. I think I said that earlier.
Yeah.
Basically, it's her sitting at the bottom of some stairs, not
hmm
like this, more like curl stairs and a lot closer up, zoomed in.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but there's a green glow, and obviously
Mm.
Envy and Green have, a big association with each other. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely like a good idea to say that she does set the tone with her first shot.
Mm. And
And
yeah.
sorry,
No, this happens every time. Yeah, I think like sort of yeah, in film as well. A lot of the times the opening shot can really set the tone for what the film is going for and what it's going to be about, or what you should expect from it. Like if you open with a really dark opening image for the opening shot, that's pretty much sets the tone right there. Like, okay, this isn't going to be fun, or the inverse of like it's going to be something really happy, and then it could be this. Like it's sort of a film thing of the opening shot is really important to establish everything right up front.
yeah, and I mean, like, Natalie does that perfectly here.
Mm-hmm.
Like this shot, you've got the red sofa couch bed
Yeah,
thing, which is a symbol of wealth everywhere,
yeah,
right? Like it's like Victorian era wealth. And
yeah.
then she's in that sort of gown. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's that plaque behind her, and then you've got
Mm-hmm.
that big open like stairwell thing that we see in those like Victorian era mansions, and
Yeah,
it really hits the spot with what she's trying to go for here, which obviously she starts by talking about, revolutionary France.
yeah,
Um, and it's kind of that same era of buildings as well.
yeah. The yeah, it's a very well put together, and also through and for those who haven't seen it, there's various throughout the various chapters, there's all these different way characters. I guess you could say she plays. Like sometimes she's herself, and then sometimes she's more of a like, I guess like playing like a rich character,
Yeah, she
basically.
laughs a little bit.
Yeah,
She she does the thing where she's like, um, she's like wealthy or like she's not wealthy.
yeah,
She does, as you say, she plays like different characters, I guess.
yeah, and a variety of different costumes and makeup, and it's sort of a very large production to sort of illustrate the various characters and to sort of differentiate it all, because there's one that's in like black and white, which is like one, right, one of them's in
Yeah,
like black and white,
that
which
one's
is
crazy.
great. And then there's one where she's in like a bathtub just covered in jewels, and then there's all these other various different ones. She's in a coffin at one point. It sort of goes throughout all these different things.
Yeah, I mean it's really great. I think
Mm.
I don't think there's a single sort of costume that didn't hit the mark.
Yeah, because they all sort of fit and they all are saying something or have a purpose for being there. It's not just something for the sake of something.
Yeah, and I mean like at the start of the video there's that costume she has where she's just in a bathtub covered in jewels,
Yeah.
and she has some gold on the left side of her face. And
Yeah.
then later on, she's in the same bathtub,
Mm.
but she's got silver glitter on the other side of her face. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a weird juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Well, what did you think about that one? Because I loved that sort of vibe.
I didn't. There's probably stuff I didn't notice because it seems like this is very dense and there's a lot that you could take from it. So
Oh
I, I,
yeah.
I didn't catch that one. There's probably a few other things I didn't catch. So sorry, but it's
Good.
I was more because I was more like focused on what she was saying instead of like necessarily paying. I was paying more attention to the words instead of the look because I didn't because I noticed so I noticed all the different looks of course, but I thought the words were
Mm. The words are
equally
the essence.
important. But I guess it's sort of you would need both for like a perfect image, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, like obviously you don't have anything without the words here. Like I think
Yeah.
the scripting is perfect. And actually, there's actually a quote from this essay that I used in my Year 12 yearbook quote, actually.
Oh, what's the quote?
It's opulence is not abundance, but opulence is the aesthetic of abundance. That is the quote I used
Mm-hmm.
on my thing because I think it just captures so perfectly
Mm-hmm.
opulence.
Yes. It's. I guess. Do you want to sort of start sort of delving into the chapters and the contents of the words of
Yeah,
the essay? Yeah.
absolutely.
So I guess. Do you want to start because you're a lot more familiar with this, and I feel like you should go through it because you could probably explain it better than I could.
Yeah, of course. So basically, like, do you want me to start at the start, or how do you want me to?
I don't really mind. Really, I don't think it necessarily matters. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm fine for you to
sorry.
start at the beginning and just sort of we work our way through. Or
Yeah, so basically, at the start of the essay, she's playing, a wealthy person, and the
mm-hmm.
revolution's coming, the guillotine's coming,
Yeah,
revolutionary France vibes,
yeah,
and she goes into saying, "Hey, I'm gonna explain my story,"
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and basically, she starts off talking kind of about, how wealth is a symbol of power.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
well, sorry, not wealth. Opulence is
opulence. Yeah,
something that wealthy use to show their power because they feel like they've got to, you know, make
mm-hmm.
it show
Yeah,
and how opulence is basically the American dream in a nutshell.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically, it's very much a thing of you sort of sort of the and so she sort of goes through various examples like the Great Gatsby, for example, which is essentially about this man who has all this wealth and everything, but he doesn't, and he throws these parties, but he doesn't like to. He's just doing it to impress a girl, to show off,
Mm.
to show that he's made it, and it's sort of
Yeah,
that is part of definitely some people's views in America of the it's very much
yeah. I mean, like I think the Great Gatsby example is really great because it's basically saying, yeah, so this guy doesn't like this sort of stuff, but he's got to prove himself to someone.
mm-hmm,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and I mean, she then goes and says, when I wrote my 10th grade English
yeah,
essay and I wrote about how money always leads to happiness, and then she got a D minus.
yeah,
Yeah, and then there's also a very great like analogy about like Donald Trump and like
yeah,
powerful people. It's like
yeah,
the quote's actually here. Why does Donald Trump's apartment look like Liberus married a Turkmenistani dictator and moved into a cheesecake factory? Because he's trying to send a message, maybe to the
mm,
world, maybe to himself, saying, "Behold, I am a winner, a very stable genius with one of the highest IQs." Um,
yes.
it's a great quote. It's
Yeah,
such a great quote.
it's a really great quote, and like Donald Trump to a lot of people is a symbol of wealth. Even though he's not that rich actually, as much as he
He's
would like you to believe.
one of there was someone they asked like how much do you think it would have to get the Trumps on, and the person they were asking replied, probably not as much as you think.
Yeah,
Um,
because it's been sort of
they're struggling, I reckon, but that's
yeah,
not important. Yeah.
but to a lot of people outwardly who aren't massively familiar and don't sort of I don't like research. I guess is the best way to put it. Probably don't know that he's not actually as rich as he looks like he is, and as he tries to make it out that he is. Like, and because that's sort of
Yeah.
because if he sort of it sort of uses sort of the whole being rich or appearing rich. People automatically have sort of more of a, I guess, respect for you, or they try and.
Well, it
Well, it depends.
depends. Like, I
It
mean, I
depends.
think
Like it
uh
depends on certain sides of this on the sort of spectrum of politically speaking. You know, some people, you know, on the right maybe don't mind certain rich people, but the rich people that agree with them and are against taxes or that kind of thing. And then there's the other side, which is, you know, the left, which who might prefer people who use their great sums of wealth to donate, and they think
mm,
that, you know, so I could sort of depend.
prefer
Like,
that people don't have wealth. That would be better. But
I
whatever.
mean, it probably would be better if people
I
didn't
think
have millions of
I
billions of
think
dollars of wealth.
actually in this essay at some point, Natalie captures it perfectly based by saying, "What does it even mean to be rich if there's no one that's poor?"
Yeah.
I think that was a quote here that explains the problem with wealth perfectly. Is that, well, if
Hmm.
there's going to be rich people, there has to be poor people.
Yeah, like because if everyone's rich, quote unquote, then nobody's rich because
Yeah,
it doesn't work like that. You know, it's
and then
like
society collapses because there's no one to do anything. So
exactly, yeah, because if we all, you know, had the money, say if we all had the same amount of money as like Elon Musk, for example, then nothing would be done because we don't need to do anything because we've got
exactly.
billions of dollars that we can live off for the rest of our lives. And you
Well,
know,
except we wouldn't be our money would be worth nothing in that.
exactly, yeah, yes,
But
that's why you're socialist, right? Because then
yeah, hell yeah.
everything has to be
Uh,
shared.
mm, not
Well,
necessarily. It's more
well,
just like the mutual aid is my thing. Mutual aid, not
uh,
necessarily share everything. It's hard to
uh,
explain in like 10 minutes, you know.
yeah,
But
yeah. So
basically, yeah. Sorry, you go.
yeah, no. So yeah, so wealth is it's very much the yeah a look of grandeur or you know more being better than you know and trying to look yeah better than you are then I don't really know what the point of I'm like sort of yeah
But yeah,
it
opulence is proving yourself, your success to everyone around you, basically.
yes and it's interesting that people sort of want to live like that when you probably don't when like I don't know like it's interesting to sort of have that try and create that appearance when a lot of people either don't care or you shouldn't care about those like either they don't care about you or you shouldn't care about those people's thoughts because they're just because a lot of them are people you probably don't like and so it's interesting to try and or people you don't even really know that well so it's interesting when people try to create a look of grandeur and try to seem better than they are towards people that really shouldn't matter to them if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess the thing is then, like, it depends, like,
Mm,
how their wealth was made, like,
yeah,
how they treat others, for example.
yeah,
Um, and I guess it kind of plays in perfectly to the second half of that chapter where she starts talking about hip hop, you know, like
yeah.
Cardi B and okay, I'm not
Eminem.
gonna, yeah, that one. Um, I can't pronounce it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and basically it's like, well, hip hop is the biggest, you know, sort of example of people talking about the American dream. It's people
Hmm.
who went from nothing to having everything.
Yeah.
Um,
And that yeah and that's a real staple of various things. There's even you know there's movies that sort of look at and sort of analyze you know like immigrants for example trying to achieve the quote unquote American dream and the sort of I guess difficulties that come from that considering it's really not that easy to achieve that dream.
well, I mean, if you look at the um if you look at the wealth disparities in America, like the
Mm,
American dream is it doesn't exist. Like
yeah,
things like 50%, 55% or something of Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
yeah, And
That's the American dream,
so
like
what
the
does
American
paycheck to
nightmare, really.
paycheck mean? So
Oh, basically, if you like don't get your next paycheck, you're not going to be able to pay your rent.
right,
That's paycheck to paycheck.
that's 50 over 50, over
I'm
half the
pretty sure.
population, or around there.
What?
Um,
I think so, yeah.
well, that's not very good. Like,
54% of Americans.
so still more than half, a lot more than it should be.
Yeah.
It should be zero. We shouldn't, like, I don't know how it is here. It doesn't seem to be as big of a problem in Australia.
I
I
think
think, like, it's
we
probably still
have.
a problem for people, but it's not like, I would
I
like to
mean,
assume it's not 50 over half the country can't, you
I
know.
don't think it's that high. It's a lot less,
Yeah.
but Australia has. It does have a better welfare state
Mhm.
than the United States, although that is slowly eroding.
Yeah.
It is getting worse in Australia with, rising house prices and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, yeah,
Yeah,
how the yeah, opulence is, it's always interesting to me, and I don't really care for people who live like that, who are so I mean, in this essay, in fact, she names, various YouTubers who just seem like, well, a YouTuber
I think it
who
was two. I think it was
Gigi Gorgeous, was it, or
yeah,
yeah,
something like that.
and how like sort of how this incredibly privileged woman sort of goes to, like, in the essay, she Contra not Natalie basically is talking about how she went to, like, Walmart and was acting like, oh my god, this is like what regular people have to live like. Oh my god, it's so
Yeah,
hard. And it's like, well, that's not, like, I don't, like, it's so just irritating to see people like that, it's
yeah. It's I think it's Gigi Gorgeous and then Jeffree Star
Jeffree
was the
Star.
other one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but she sort of mentions that Jeffree Star is, like, sort of the opposite of that, as, like, in terms of, like, he's very rich, but he acts like like a regular person who just so happens to have a very high amount of wealth.
yeah, and I think that's the key difference. But also at the same time, like she said that like if you've got like someone who's thinking about how $69,000 could pay off your medical debt or how you'd be able to afford
Yeah,
cancer treatment or whatever,
yeah,
then that stuff's gonna start, you know,
yeah,
as she says,
because
getting under your skin, and then people are
yeah,
gonna start building guillotines again. That's what she said.
yeah, and that's the thing, like, with influencers and people on YouTube and TikTok and all these other various platforms, they can try, like, it kind of comes with certain actors and other sort of celebrities who try and play off this whole, like, oh, I'm just like you guys, and at a certain point it's very much like, well, I can't. People kind of get sick of that shtick, as it were. Like, I presume you know who Jennifer Lawrence is, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So
I'm
she,
not that out of touch with
yeah.
society.
I just want to make sure. Yeah. So she, for a long time was basically trying to play up this whole shtick. I guess is the I don't of being, like, relatable to, like, regular people, like non-celebrity people, and at first, people found it to be very charming and funny, and it was very slowly waned because it got to a point of, like, well, this isn't relatable at all. Like, nobody has done this, like, because she would just be telling these stories and it's like, oh yeah, everyone's done this, right? And it's like, no. And so people sort of slowly started to dislike her, Jennifer Lawrence, more because they're like, she's trying to act like she isn't rich, and I kind of
Yeah,
think, like, I would, even though I don't really care for it. I would almost prefer it if they acted like they were rich. Because it's like, we all know you are. Like, I don't know why you don't just own it. You know, it's like, because eventually trying to seem relatable eventually is going to turn people off because they know you're not actually that relatable, you know?
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, like it still depends on like how they act, really, as well. Like, do you
Mm-hmm.
know Hassan Abi, Hassan Piker?
Yes, I'm aware of Hassan. I've checked out. I don't watch his streams. I sort of watch the highlights that he posts. I see
Well,
some of the stuff he does. Not everything.
obviously, he is a socialist.
Yes. Oh
Obviously.
yeah. I saw the YouTube video you posted.
Oh, you did, yeah.
Yes. And where can we find that YouTube channel? That video,
It
Brad?
will
Watch it.
be production on YouTube. You can find it there.
Yeah.
So I think then you're probably going to know what I'm going to say on this. A similar thing
More or
happened.
less. Yeah.
Yeah, a similar thing has happened to Hassan, but it's more cringe and it's
Yeah.
less, sort of less justifiable because
Mhm.
he is wealthy,
Mhm.
obviously. Um, he doesn't try to hide it. In fact, he actually makes it very clear in a transparent way, in a like that he has a lot of money. He doesn't
Mhm.
flex
Yeah.
his wealth. He makes it clear though that he does have wealth. He doesn't try and hide it or anything.
Yeah.
While at the same time, he is relatable. Like he doesn't.
Yeah. Well, because he's just a
Mm,
guy, basically, and he just reacts to. Yeah, that's more or less most of what he does on Twitch, right? He just reacts
yeah,
to political content.
I mean, like he lives in a big house with his family. So he's living with his family.
Mm.
He didn't buy the house. He bought it like he bought basically a sort of
Mhm.
he bought it with a mortgage thing. That's
Yeah.
what I was looking.
Yeah.
um, but he bought it with a mortgage, and people would be like, "Oh, you're not a leftist. You're rich. You can't be rich and be a leftist," which is wrong because
I mean, yeah, I do
he,
heavily
yeah,
disagree with that point. Like, isn't Bernie Sanders relatively rich, even though he is a socialist as well, right?
yeah. I mean, like it's a horrible take
Mm.
because especially in the case of like Hassan, like
Mm-hmm.
Hassan has spent his entire life
Mm.
advocating for socialist policies, and like
Yeah.
it's how he got his wealth from doing that.
Yeah.
So, that's the sort of thing. But it's envy, which I think Natalie also spoke about, which has been like, well, eventually they're gonna come back to get you.
Yeah.
But
I mean, yeah.
mm,
I mean, it's kind of what happened to her as well when making some comments that people didn't like and calling her transphobic and everything, which is absurd. That is an absurd thing to
yeah,
say
of
to a
course, yeah.
trans person that they are
Well,
transphobic.
I
It
mean,
makes like
trans
no
people
sense.
can be transphobic. I mean, Blair White is transphobic and she is
Mm.
trans, but like it's more like the context around like what she was saying
Mm-hmm.
in those instances, like
Yeah.
they were like just like legitimate questions. There was no sort of
It was. Yeah. It
problems,
wasn't. There was no malicious
no malicious
statement.
intent. It didn't even come across as malicious. It was not transphobic like at all.
Mm.
And
I of course I am not familiar with this, but I would assume it probably wasn't transphobic because she just doesn't seem like that kind of person on the knowledge I have of her.
she's not transphobic. I can tell you that much. She actually got cancelled for this video. She got cancelled for this as
Oh
well.
yeah.
But do you know why she got cancelled for this one? Because it's
I think
insane.
I saw this one. Is it because she said the word trap or something?
No, no,
No.
no, no, no. That
Okay.
that would be fine. That would be completely fine.
Mm.
Um, because in this case, she is a trans woman. Like that's something that she can say and own and whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone cares about that.
It's
It's
like
it's a
yeah.
five. She got cancelled for a 5-second segment
Mm-hmm.
of someone else reading a quote, Buck Angel,
Yeah.
who has a questionable past with non-binary people, and she got heavily cancelled for that one.
That
and it actually overshadowed how good this video is.
that doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's so weird. And like I don't I think like in certain occasions I think it's okay to be upset with people for saying bad things, or sort of associate like if it's an incredibly minimal part of the video, and she'd said nothing of the sort. It was a completely different person who said this quote. It doesn't make any sense to get
And like
upset.
the quote wasn't even related to that drama. It was just the fact that this was the person that she got to do it.
Yeah, that it's very weird. It's sort of like I don't understand why it's considered like the whole sort of notion, I guess of canceling people, if like this is I guess the term for it. It's sort of weird how it can affect people who shouldn't be affected, and then it doesn't
Mm.
really affect people who it should affect. Like
Yeah, well,
a
I
lot
mean,
of famous people have been quote unquote cancelled, but
it
in
doesn't have an
reality
impact.
they nothing's happened. People get upset, but they still get work, they still have all this stuff. But then there are people who shouldn't be cancelled and they do, and then they actually do lose out on work. And it's interesting to me how
Yeah,
certain people will claim that, oh, I've been cancelled, and it's like, but you still have a platform. The fact that
yeah.
you can say that you've been cancelled means you haven't. Like you would not be on the internet, you would not be on Twitter, you wouldn't be on,
Oh, well, I
well,
mean,
you
Natalie got cancelled. She started her platform. It's just she got a lot of hate and she started doing cocaine and stuff, and because of it. So I mean, I'd say that did affect her.
that
Um,
is true. But it's always people, it's a lot of comedians who usually get, like, of course, like, who get cancelled for things, but they don't, and there's no real repercussions because they still are doing work, they're still doing shows, they're still
yeah,
writing material, they've still got specials on Netflix and such. Like I don't understand
yeah.
what the problem is.
And ultimately, it's often the comedians who are the most hurtful and harmful because some
Mm-hmm.
of the stuff they say,
Yeah,
it's not even that funny.
yeah,
It's just insensitive, and then they put like a they get like an audience who's like gonna laugh at anything they say.
yeah. Like, you know, Dave Chappelle, his recent special was very controversial. Didn't. I liked some of the material, but some of it I was like, I don't really think that's okay. I don't think you
Yeah,
should be allowed to say that. Well,
like the
I'm all for
difference is
free
like,
speech, but also like just because you can say something doesn't mean you should.
well, free speech isn't you can say whatever you want. Free speech is, well,
That is
yeah,
true.
you
Actually, it
can have
technically
any
isn't. Yeah.
opinion. It's not just like,
That
oh,
is
I'm
true. Yeah.
gonna, yeah,
It's why a white person can't just yell the N word at a group of black people and get away with it. Like that's not technically, because that isn't, because that's just hateful speech. That's not like it's you know he can he can have he can not like them, for example, but if he says the word, like he shouldn't be allowed to get away with it because it's a very negative word. That means it's so sort of the whole freedom of speech. You can think whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Is that what you said, what you meant?
not necessarily. I think people are gonna say what they want regardless of whatever
The
you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think the way that we treat that isn't bad. See, I think cancel culture is positive. I think
Mm.
it's democratization of free speech. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's being misused occasionally.
I
Um,
would agree with that. I do think at times it's like this person I guess sort of. So do you? So okay. So So say someone, a comedian, makes some. They like 10 years ago made some bad jokes that haven't aged well, but they have apologized for those jokes. Do you think they should be still? They should lose work for
I
that,
don't think
despite.
I don't think anyone with more than two brain cells would suggest that they should lose work or anything because of that.
Yeah.
Um, and generally, when that happens, most people just don't care anymore once they say like apologize. If it's like legitimate and stuff,
Yeah.
it's when if it's recent, maybe it could take a while to die down. But
Yeah.
generally, if they apologize, when it's legitimate, like there's not going to be a huge deal.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so like the Dave Chappelle stuff, like I don't agree with everything he said. I don't think he should have said what he said because I don't think it's okay, and I don't even think they're particularly funny either. Like if they were funny, like that's the thing too. If I find it funny, I'm less likely to be upset, but I can see how people who might be affected by those jokes don't find it funny. Like if there's funny jokes
Well,
about different
yeah.
groups of people.
I mean, he said that he was Team Turf, didn't he? Like that's
Yes,
when
he
you
did say that
say stuff like
exactly.
that, that's well, you've crossed the line so far when you come out and just admit that straight away.
Yeah, and I will admit he completely either misinterpreted or just lied about the J.K. Rowling thing. Like,
Oh yeah, no.
I
J.K. Rowling is pretty bad
yeah,
as a person. If
mm,
anyone wants to know more about that, you can watch Contrapoints essay on J.K. Rowling as well, which is another good one.
yes. So it ties it all back in. So, but we were
Yeah.
talking about wealth, and we
We
got
were
an
talking about we were talking
oh,
about
opulence.
Christelle and Italian booze.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting how I guess to sort of connect the 2 points of sort of the appearance of wealth and that it often from my perspective it allows certain people to get away with more things and to face less consequences for actions if that makes sense. Like I
Absolutely.
think in terms of the law, rich people and people who and people who have opulence and wealth and all that, they very much can get away with a lot more with things that, like, if I did, I would be in prison, but because of their life, they can get away
Yeah.
with it. And in fact, in Contrapoint's video, she talks about Donald Trump and how he can say what he wants and do all these things he wants, and he can get away with it because he's got
And people
money.
still cheer
And
him and
people,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he's still got supporters and people who follow him and would vote for him in an election, despite him making objectively abhorrent and disgusting comments about various groups of people. But they don't care because he's got money, and so it sort of is an interesting point of money. Basically, the more money you have, the more you can get away with, essentially.
Yeah, of course. And I mean that kind of ties back as well, to what she says about hip hop. Um,
Yeah.
and how like, hip hop is, it's it's literally people who are self-made millionaires, not billionaires.
Yeah.
And, since they're self-made millionaires, they kind of do get that escape as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just kind of ends up being this sort of thing where, I think there is a very small rapper, Bamboo D Pistola, who is a socialist who is not rich, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. Um, Basically, who talks a lot about how, a lot of rappers, they basically sell out sort of thing.
Oh, okay. I
You
mean
know, they
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, once they get rich, they're like, yeah, I'm rich. Look at what I've done. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, I get it. It's a celebration of success. And it's in this sort of way where it's like, it's portrayed as something that's a really great, really positive, and, really easy to do. And then
Mm-hmm.
you look at the number of people who get to that point, and you're
Yeah.
like, this isn't real. This is not, it's a fantasy. And you know what that ties into? The title of the second chapter, which is fantasy.
Mm. Oh, very good. That's a very good transition. Yeah. Yeah, because I think people want to be rich. A lot of people like to think about being rich, and wish that they could have be rich, but I think like that's not possible. Like so many rich people have either inherited wealth or they've gotten lucky. Like
Yeah,
it's incredibly rare for anything beyond those two things to really happen. I feel like, even people who claim they're self-made aren't. Like they have gotten money from people in their life. Various celebrities and politicians and all that have made claims of like, oh yeah, I'm a self-made millionaire, and a quick bit of research debunks that, and they're not. They inherited money, so it's kind of like, well, now you're just lying to me, and I don't understand.
it's kind of like when Donald Trump's just like, I got a small loan from my father,
Of a
so I'm
million dollars.
self-made.
Yeah, of a small loan of $1 million. Like that just
Yeah,
happens.
that's more money than I think I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
money.
just interesting, the fantasy. But I think some people give, again, to sort of connect sort of things together. It's sort of like, I think a lot of people, some people occasionally give rich people leeway because they would see them, they kind of can try and see themselves in these people, and so they were like, oh well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't want to be in jail or whatever. So they give them more leeway, or a free pass to be like, no, you can get away with that. And it's sort of, I guess with
Yeah,
the law as well, I guess you could say as well, it sort of goes back to that theme as well.
yeah, and I mean, like, that's true. Also, I did send you the transcript of the essay as well.
Oh, okay, cool. I might as well have that open just because that'll be easier to go through as we
Yeah,
go through this. Okay, just give me a second. I'll just get it open. So the yeah, so it's interesting, the entire how people, like, I guess sort of what other, like, the sort of fantasy of being rich. Do you have like more points you want to make about the essay, or
yeah,
just about?
I'd love to get into this next section, I think is a really important section,
Hmm.
fantasy.
Yeah.
Basically, starts off by, Natalie's just like, she goes to an art museum and she's like, okay, cool, there's some great artists here, but can I buy it?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And, the desire, the fantasy of everyone that they'll own everything one day.
Yeah.
Um, and then you realize, you look back and you be like, oh, wait, there's been like 50 billion people who have lived on this planet and none of them have ever owned anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly interesting to look at and to sort of think about these people who, like, I think a lot of people will. I don't think I'm gonna be massively controversial when I say that, like, it's like rich people just don't understand the sort of hardships of a lot of them anyway don't really understand the hardships of, like, regular people, people who don't have wealth. And it's,
I
you
don't
know
think that's controversial. I think that's a fact.
yeah, no, it's I can't really think of any major, like, of a lot of majorly rich people who can understand, like, oh no, this is difficult. Like, if you look at billionaires, people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all these people, it's like, who who own billions of dollars, but they don't, use that money for anything good. Like, they don't, do anything to help out workers. They don't, they don't.
It's the fetishization of money, and they have to build that sort of that graph. The line goes up equals good.
Yeah.
But
And
really, every time that line goes up, you hurt like 50,000 people.
mm-hmm.
So line going up is good for the rich, bad for the poor.
Yeah. And that's why, a lot of people are for taxing the rich. I presume you are definitely part of that group who would
Oh, yeah, without a
absolutely
doubt.
tax
I
the
think
rich.
as long as money exists, you need to redistribute it
Yeah.
more successfully.
Well, that's the kind of problem. It's like, okay, yes, taxing people is good, and I don't have an inherent problem with tax. Like, I guess it sort of depends on how much money you make and whether it's worth it to pay taxes, I guess.
Well,
Um,
that's why you would have a progressive tax. You would have like the rich would pay more in taxes than the poor.
yeah. So I'm not as familiar with taxes because I don't need to really pay taxes yet, but I assume that does everyone pay like the same amount in taxes or?
I don't know about in America, but I'm pretty sure in Australia it's a progressive taxing rate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's like 40% for the top 1%, which is nowhere near what it should be. I think if you
That's
go back
good. That's
to
gonna be, yeah, like a drop in it. Like it's gonna be not
if
much.
you go back to the taxation rates in like America post World War II,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll just find this.
Yeah. It's very much,
Oh,
taxation. I think is okay, and I definitely think people who complain about it's always the rich people who complain about having to pay tax. I mean, everyone complains about taxes, but it's the rich people who complain the most about having
yeah,
to
I
pay
mean,
tax.
if you look at post World War II America,
Mm-hmm.
there was a legitimate threat of the communist revolution in post World War II America.
Mm-hmm.
So to oppose that, the president then, I can't remember the name of, basically put in
Mm-hmm.
really, really high taxes. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the culture, the sort of everything that followed
Mm-hmm.
post World War II America, it was economic prosperity.
Yeah.
It was a decent country back then. It still had problems, but a lot better than it was today.
Yeah.
Um, and essentially what you end up seeing is now that the wealth disparity between the rich and poor in America is growing again, which Natalie talks about in her essay. It says
Yeah.
like, well, wealth disparity is a real problem here, and it's gonna get to the point of a revolution.
Yeah. It's sort of, yeah, to sort of go back to the sort of the video. I know I'm rambling a lot, and I'm sort of not making complete sentences, but it's I've never really done an episode like this, so I kind of need to sort of find my bearings.
That's all good. Well, I mean, but like she kind of goes on after saying that like no one can own everything,
Yeah.
so instead you got to fake it, you got to make that illusion. And then she goes into what I think is a very important part of the essay where she talks about uh
Mm.
basically the etymology behind opulence,
Yeah.
what it means, and the quote that I love is in this thing, and
Yeah.
it's opulence is not abundance, opulence is the aesthetic of abundance, it's the aesthetic
Yes.
of owning everything.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, yeah, before, but it is a very good quote because it isn't, yeah, inherently, just because you have, opulence, a look of opulence, it doesn't mean you are, you have all that money. It's just you want to look like that so you appear better.
Like, yeah, so I was working in a deli at minimum wage, and I would use that money and I would buy suits. And that's opulence, but
Yeah.
I did not have any of that in abundance. I would spend like my entire paycheck on like suits.
How much
Um,
did you get paid at that deli?
it would have been about between 200 and 300 a week, probably
A-
less than that.
And you'd spend it all, or more or less all of it,
Suits.
on suits,
Yeah,
right?
and do you know how many suits I managed to get with that?
How many?
Like four.
In with one paycheck or like?
No, in like the entire time I worked there, which was like 6 months.
Wow, that is not a lot.
Well, I mean, suits are expensive.
Yeah, no, suits
That's also important.
are expensive. Yeah.
So basically, opulence, there's a phrase which is opulence, you own everything.
Mhm.
And it comes from the documentary Paris is Burning, which is about Harlem ballroom culture in the 1980s.
Mhm.
Um, and it's basically Opulence, opulence, you own everything. I don't know why I
Yeah.
said it like that. I don't know why. I just saw it in full caps, so I said it in full caps.
Yeah. On the transcript. Yeah. So looking
Yeah.
at that exact bit right now. Yeah.
Um, and basically this is like, when we really start getting into like a lot of important stuff about language and linguistics and how like a lot of, slang comes from, marginalized communities,
Mhm.
specifically. queer Latin American and Black folk
Hmm.
um, is where a lot of that linguistics, like language comes from.
Yeah, 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 and it's interesting to sort of go with this sort of what you're talking about, or something sort of tangentially related. It's sort of, you know, I guess it's interesting how these certain phrases and words have sort of been, I don't know, I get appropriated, I guess would be the best word, by people who.
I think appropriate is the word that's used because people end up using that language without sort of understanding the history of the language. Um,
Yeah, and where it
which
comes from,
yeah,
and
like people who like the yas with like an A is
yes,
like,
yes,
it's from queer culture and it's like, you know, it's getting used by a lot more people, which is great. But
yeah,
along the way, it starts to lose its original meaning.
yeah,
Well, yeah, a lot of people who cancel Contrapoints haven't actually watched her videos, so
yeah. And I feel like that can occasionally be a problem, if someone hears a quote or they read something either out of context or without like without the full story, which is, I guess, the same thing with being out of context. But and so they cancel this person for no real reason, especially with the lack of um context to add to it all, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, after like that goes all that about language and how, opulence is, it's the wealth they've acquired or been
yeah,
denied. Even they're trying to display that and be like, hey,
hmm,
I could do this if I could.
yeah,
She then goes in to talk about class,
yeah,
um, which I think is great. That she talks about how Marxist analysis
mm,
of modern life doesn't really, it makes sense if you know what you're talking about and you understand
yeah,
Marxist analysis, but if you don't know anything about Marx, the
hmm,
idea of
yeah,
bourgeoisie and proletariat just doesn't make any sense. Like
yeah,
it has no bearing on you at all. Basically, she says, there's a lot more nuance than bourgeoisie and proletariat. It's like,
hmm,
what about a bartender who owns the bar she works in, and what about YouTubers, which side of the revolution are we on?
yeah,
And I did talk about it in my recent video, so go and look at that one, folk.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. That, yeah, YouTubers are incredibly, rich
it's
people.
Hassan as well, Hassan especially.
Yeah, like he's
Um,
a rich person who is a socialist, and so he can't be rich. And I think that's an interesting.
well, he can be rich,
I mean,
it's
no,
just a
yeah,
bad
well,
day.
no, I mean, like, but to some people, he can't be rich because he's a socialist.
Yeah, to the cringe fake leftists who think they understand ideology but actually
I
don't.
mean, there's
But
also the people on the right who just wanted to cancel him and are like, look, he's not actually a
oh
socialist.
yeah, they absolutely jumped that. Ben Shapiro made like a video on it,
Yeah, which was like
which is
months after it happened as
hilarious,
well.
bro.
By the way, it was
Was
it
it?
was
I thought it was around the same time it came out.
I don't know,
Ben
but
Shapiro is so out of touch, though.
I mean, he claims to be a libertarian. I just realized that we are like barely through this essay. We've been recording for over an hour, and there's still so much to talk about in this essay.
Yeah, we gotta move quicker.
Yeah,
I think we're at three. Oh
we're at
God,
three.
we're
We
in like
just got to
quarter of
three
the way
of
through.
seven.
Oh my God,
I
dude.
guess we'll. I mean, yeah. So yeah, class. I really liked. I'm just reading through the transcript. How and Natalie's talking about is like, people don't understand how difficult it is to be this blonde, and I'm like, well, and that's kind of an interesting thing. It's always interesting when rich people are like, oh, you don't know how hard it is to be me, and then they name something that isn't even like a bad thing, like, oh, my hair is like this, or I only have this much money. It's like, okay, I don't care, like, it's that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I think there is a lot of people who are rich and make complaints about dumb things. Meanwhile, like, people just want to, like, eat.
Have enough money to live. Like
Yeah, and surviving isn't living. That's a fact. Living
that is
is
true, yeah.
expressing yourself and doing what you enjoy.
But
And,
yeah, yeah, people who yeah, people yeah, surviving. Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I've never not like until you I haven't really thought about it until you just mentioned it, how like the term surviving like isn't okay. Like as in a first world country, people shouldn't have to survive. They should just be able to live. Like it's
unfortunately, good luck with that because every time socialism happens, the US just goes in there and is like, we're gonna do a coup, which is why Venezuela died because the US literally sent the CIA in to Venezuela and, said we're gonna start a coup.
yeah, and it I don't understand the like problems with social like because like again I'm very much I try to be in the center of everything, but there are times where I genuinely am like I don't understand what's wrong with so like
It's
these
Red Scare. It was like the Red Scare
yeah, well
tactics of
because
the
they're like, oh well,
1950s.
it's just communism, right? Isn't that what a lot of people sort of are like, oh,
People people were taught in like the 1950s to around 2000 that communism was like everyone's poor
and
and stuff.
then the government prospers, right, or something,
Yeah,
so
and
yeah.
it's like there's like which and then they use like China or like
Russia,
yeah, the Soviet Union as examples. And the Soviet Union
didn't that
struggled.
collapse?
It did collapse. The reason the Soviet Union collapsed was because, well, firstly, they had just, been fucked over in a world war. Let's be
Oh, that
honest.
is
They
true. That
lost
was yeah, the Cold War,
millions of
yeah.
people. Secondly, they're not really on fertile land.
Mm.
Like, like, what's it called? That place, that
Chernobyl.
Russia's in. No, no,
No.
Russia's in that place.
Mm.
Um, Siberia. Siberia isn't exactly the best for crops.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, it's pretty cold.
Yeah.
Um,
It's, who
Furthermore,
would have thought that Russia's a cold country?
if you even like zoom in on like Berlin, like East and West Berlin, like all of the industry areas,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at where the industry areas was, they were all taken by the West, and the
Mm-hmm.
Soviet Union got nothing, like in terms of industry in Berlin.
Yeah.
Which is why East Berlin was so different to West Berlin.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
And
Yeah, because one
then
of them had the giant fucking wall around it
and
to
then you
keep the
also
other side out.
yeah. Well, I mean, the wall was an attempt to try and stop people, who were getting an education in the Soviet Union,
Mm.
ditching over to the other side, which was like, oh, you can get rich here. The
Yeah.
only reason to get rich is that's where all the industry is.
Yeah.
But and the last thing, of course, is, you know, the fact that the Soviet Union was very authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and if you look throughout history, one of the biggest things that leads to problems is when you're authoritarian, which is
Mm-hmm.
why government is bad. It's a fact. It's a fact, it's a fact. It's a fact. Government is bad, get rid of government. Mutual aid, But anyway. Um, Basically, your grandparents were taught that in school,
mm.
but they weren't taught that side. They were just told communism bad, and then they were also just like, also, this thing called socialism is just as bad as communism.
I mean, I can understand why communism isn't like the greatest thing. Like,
It depends on the type. Like if you
yeah.
have Soviets weren't even they were socialists. Like
Mm-hmm.
they weren't communists. Like they had a communist party in China. They weren't socialists. But
Yeah.
the Soviet Union, they're like it's like if you ask the US what communism is, they'll say communism is when poor, even though like a communist society is a stateless, moneyless, classless society. That's
Mm.
that's literally the definition that Marx gave in the Communist Manifesto.
Mm. And then socialism is. I always, for the longest time, thought it was that like they were kind of the same thing. I knew they weren't exactly the same, but I always sort of figured the basic concept of socialism
It
and is different.
depends on the type, really. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I know like anarcho-socialism and anarcho-communism are basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really the name and what's preferred.
Yeah.
Um, Socialism itself is generally you get out of society what you put in, but everyone gets like enough.
Yeah.
Whereas communism is more you get everyone gets equal out of society.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think, which is each according to his ability, from each according to his ability, each according to his need.
Yeah.
I believe that if you have that everyone should have a baseline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also believe that everyone should get out of society what they put in.
Yeah.
But then following on to that, I also only think that it's possible to do that fairly by using mutual aid and having anarcho-socialism as
Yeah.
opposed to anarcho-communism. It's really just a semantic issue.
Yeah.
Uh, I just say anarchist is better because most anarchists, real anarchists, are left-wing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anarcho-capitalists are not. That it's contradictory and they're not anarchist.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. It's yeah, the sort of like idea of socialism is like it's always interesting because because I guess sort of connected sort of people who don't, it's a lot of right-wing people. I just sort of think people in general who don't have a real good understanding of socialism don't sort of assume, like, of course like I assume socialism, there's all the classes, it's sort of like everyone's at like the same class level, I would assume, or
I think the ideal thing would be class doesn't matter because, your
it doesn't.
class
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you are, like sort of middle class, or if you're, below or above that, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and by extension, those classes end up not existing, really.
Yeah.
Which is better because the fact that you can have someone who's poor and someone who's rich, that's disgusting, honestly.
Yeah. And I
Like we have
guess, yeah.
300 and we have like 300,000 empty houses and 150,000 homeless people.
Wait, what? Really? We could give homes to the
If
entire
if
homeless
we
population
if we just forcibly retook empty houses, then yeah, we could house the entire homeless population of
and still
Australia.
have more. That
Yeah,
doesn't. I don't. Oh, what I. So the government's just fucked.
yeah.
Um, cool. Elections in a few months. I'll have to vote. I'll be fine. But
Well,
it doesn't matter. Nothing's gonna change. Like that's not like the homeless are.
actually, knowing where you live, I have a great candidate for you.
All right. You could tell me that after we've stopped
Yeah,
recording.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, now is talking about various things at sort of this point in the essay, and talk about YouTubers and which side of the revolution they are on, and I think it sort of depends, of course, who the YouTubers are, because some advocate for everything to stay as it is for the
Reactionaries, yeah.
the reactionaries, yeah, and then there's the other side who are the progressive types who want things to change.
Yeah, and I mean, if you even look at the wealth disparity between those two groups, the people who want things to stay have more money than the people who don't.
Yeah, well, because they're worried about losing their money.
Well, not even that, they get
Well,
sponsored by like rich people.
mm. And then and if the rich people aren't rich people anymore, then they don't get the
Or they
sponsor.
started rich, like Ben Shapiro's father was like a famous violinist.
That explains why he plays the violin. Okay, I thought it was just something pretentious he thought he should do, because he just seems like the type who'd be like, oh, this is the instrument to play. Nothing
No,
like
bro, he was a
interesting.
prodigy. He was a child prodigy, and then he went and wrote some really dumb shit.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. And yeah, so and Contrapoints makes up an interesting point about how this sort of revolution, and if it starts on Twitter,
Oh yeah, she's fucked.
she is fine. And
Like,
then she says something that I found very funny. Actually, I thought it was a very fun joke. It said, and then I'll have no choice but to do the conservative talk show circuit. Like most people whose brains are detached from their bodies. Like
that clocked so well. That
that.
was neatly done.
That's like, even though like I don't have a inherently, I don't dislike conservatives. Like I don't think they're all bad people. I'm open to hearing what they have to say.
Yeah,
Like that's still a funny joke. Like
yeah,
that is very funny. Whether you
yeah,
agree with it or not, it is funny. like
absolutely, yeah.
and this entire essay is incredibly well written. I assume she writes them herself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But she seems
Um,
very. It's very articulate. Lots of very like big
well,
words and sort of.
she went to university to study philosophy for a while and then quit
Oh, that makes
and then
sense.
started making video essays. So
Well, if you learn about philosophy, that probably gives you a pretty good understanding of the English language and
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Um,
and yes, talking about various classes and books that sort of discuss class throughout history and and she talks about this one specific one called Paul Fossil's Class: A Guide Through the American Status System,
yeah.
which describes the various classes that exist, and then some of it's out of
Focus. Yeah.
yeah, and then some of it is out of date. There is a familiarity, an almost eerie style familiarity with some of its observations that it makes.
Yeah, well, I think she says that the book focuses more on social capital rather than economic capital,
Yeah,
and how having class is important as well, sort of thing, you know.
yeah, and talking about how, if you like this a sort of theme throughout it is that if you have to work to earn your money, then you're not really a member of the upper class.
Yeah.
You're more of you sort of, and so you're still even if you do become rich and you receive all this wealth, you're not actually middle class because you had to work for it. And I feel like in this sort of book's themes and sort of what it is sort of going through, I guess.
Yeah, like I mean, like I don't know, like rich rappers are upper class, but like when they were getting started, they weren't upper class. They are now because they don't really work now.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of I think you find with a lot of musicians, they don't
Yeah,
actually do as much work. Like they might sing the song, but they're not really going to do anything beyond that. Like they will do like
not as
the
much as they
bare
used to, at
minimum.
least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they sort of are like, I will do the bare minimum that is required of me to
And
create this music.
it's the same with like billionaires. Like if you look at like Elon Musk, who is a bad person by definition. Cancel me, I'm
Oh
gay.
no. You
But
dare say a bad word about Daddy Elon? No!
oh
Oh
no, oh
no.
no. Anyone
Those
who disagrees with me, go watch Adam Something. You'll see exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. But basically, Adam Something that is. Go watch him. You can get your standing out, and he'll get rid of it. He'll knock the standing out of you. But
he'll make you
basically,
better.
like
Yeah.
Elon Musk doesn't do that much, right? Like, sure, like he
Yes.
might work a lot, but like he works in luxury. He
Mm.
like what does he do? Like
Yeah.
gets to just like he's his own boss. He has complete control over his life. Like he can do
Yeah.
whatever he wants whenever he
He
wants.
can name his kids whatever
Which
he wants, which isn't a good thing because he
which
can't name.
yeah, and I
He
mean
doesn't
like
give them proper names.
it's just like if you look at like the difference is that he has the choice to do whatever he wants.
Hmm.
Most people don't have that choice because they'll starve.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. I think when they're like, "Oh, why are all these poor people like committing crimes and why are they robbing?" It's like, I don't know.
I
Maybe because
wonder why, bro.
maybe because money isn't, they don't have it, so they have to find something to get food. But and you're not helping, and that's a problem too. Is that the government in America and other sort of first world countries don't
Even in
actually
Australia.
help. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, if you if you look at like what the number one cause of crime is, like the number one like cause of crime is poverty. People who are born into poverty are much more likely to commit a crime.
Yes.
And then
And yeah.
if you look at what causes poverty in America and like the reasons, it's very racially divided. If you look at like
Oh
where
yeah.
those areas are,
Yeah.
the past policies by like the governments, like to like divide like white people and black people, basically,
Yeah.
that's resulted in like an atmosphere where, you know, a lot of these things are on like postcode things, which and you end up where your postcode, is a more reliable indicator of
Mm.
your wealth than how hard you work.
Yeah. And there are people who are like, oh, and people like to bring up, oh, look at the statistically higher number of, people of color committing
I
crimes.
wonder why that is
And also,
statistically higher.
without in any way acknowledging and pointing out that, like, oh, maybe we should do something to help.
Yeah, and also, there's some evidence to suggest that, um, when you when you increase police presence in areas where there are a lot of where there are a lot of people of color,
Mm.
um, when you increase the police there, there's actually more crimes that get committed. So like,
Mm.
police don't even help.
Yeah.
And like,
Well,
what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna call the police after the crime's committed? It's like, what are you gonna do when you get robbed? Well, I'd prefer not to get robbed in the first place. I don't
yeah.
think calling someone after is really going to help.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a great world we live in. Let's be honest. If only we
But
lived in, places like Sweden or, those European countries
they're
that
good, except they do exploit the global south, but they're
they're
better than
they're much
America.
they're quite a bit better though.
Oh, they're so much better, bro.
They actually seem to want to help people. Certain people.
People
Like,
within their countries,
yeah, with
and like people who want to come into their countries, they want to help as well, but they still exploit the global south.
mm. Yeah,
Um,
so we sort of talk more about this.
we got tangential there.
Yeah, so I there's an interesting point that is brought up in this, where they're talking about, again, Donald Trump. He's a very sort of running topic throughout this, but I think it's fair because I think he's sort of a big part of wealth and sort of how, like, he he's essentially he's described as a poor person's idea of a rich person, basically.
Yeah,
And so they don't have a problem. And so, yeah, again, as we mentioned earlier, people don't have a problem with him, being, a bigot or whatever. They sort of like, oh well, he's just this guy who happens to have lots of money, and they find him to be relatable or whatever, despite what he's saying is not okay.
yeah. I mean, like further down, it's like the whole thing with like, the statues as well that she spoke about later.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, there's so much evidence to suggest that there's paint on these statues, but
Yeah.
because they're not actually white, um, you know, historians got harassed by people who support Donald Trump and all that,
Yeah.
the alt-right. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Because how dare they point out that, oh, this isn't actually natural, this is painted on. Like, I don't. It's such a weird thing to get upset about.
yeah, and like,
Like,
well, it's
objectively,
not really weird if you think about why they're upset about it. It's not weird because they're just hateful bigots, and they're like, well,
yeah.
you know, how dare you
But I think
question the fact that the
anyone
white
with
race is supreme?
yeah. But with anyone, I feel, with a lick of sense in them should realize these people are being ridiculous. Like, you understand why they might do it, but you should understand as well that they're being stupid and that they shouldn't be this upset over something so inconsequential.
But a lot of people they don't really pick up on that because
Yeah.
they don't understand the nuances of racial discussions. They don't even understand the nuances of art discussions.
Mm.
A lot of people are just like they're statues.
Yeah.
Which is why did you see the pictures of the Captain Cook statues getting painted red on them?
No. I
It was on the 26th of January.
This year.
Yes.
Uh,
And I thought it was great because, you know,
I am unaware of what occurred. If you don't mind enlightening me.
basically, so Australia decided to make their National Day of Pride on the day when the First Fleet arrived and
Mm-hmm.
invaded the country,
Yep.
um, which is Invasion Day. It,
Yes, that is what that is what people have decided to call it now.
yeah,
Which is their
and
right. People are in
they are
within their
right.
right.
It was an invasion. There
It.
was
I mean, it was like it is
it was the start of
colonization.
it was the start of a genocide. So,
I mean, yeah, it's
yeah,
more. Yeah, pretty much.
and basically people painted this, they came out in like the middle of the night and they painted red onto some statues of like people who, you know, came to Australia very early
Mm.
from Britain. Um, and you know, one of those was Captain Cook, and people were like, Captain Cook wasn't even in the first fleet, you fucking idiots. And I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter because this is still a symbol of
Yeah, what it stands for is
colonialism, of
still.
white British colonialism, of, you know, people um coming and
Yeah,
stealing an entire continent and claiming
yeah.
it's theirs.
It's
And
yeah. It's like it doesn't matter if he was there or not. It's what he represents that's the problem.
yeah, so, and like painting him in red is brilliant because it's like, you know, it symbolizes to me like the blood that was on like his
Mm.
hands and the hands of people like him.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. An interesting point to make of like I guess we've sort of skipped ahead to the next section of the essay of
Yeah,
taste.
that was intentional because you said that we were falling behind a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. I found it a quote actually a quote I really liked in this essay was but remember that it's both possible and even necessary to simultaneously enjoy media while also being critical of its more problematic or
Oh, right.
pernicious aspects.
That was from Anita Sarkeesian, who I'm sure you've probably heard of.
I've heard of, and oh no, I said something good about her. Now people will get upset with me for some. Well, right
Bro,
wing people will get
here
upset with
on the
me.
left, we love Anita because she was the first person, really, to stand up to what was a very misogynistic internet at the time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she was a big
Gamergate.
Gamergate. Yeah, that's right. I remember. I don't know why people care so much. It doesn't make
Well,
any sense to me.
I mean, it it well, I mean, to be fair, if Gamergate didn't happen, then like, you know, we wouldn't be talking about this essay because,
Mm,
you know, Contrapoints has said, like Natalie said that uh the reason that she started making YouTube videos, you know, like around 2016 was um because she didn't like the discourse around Gamergate.
yeah, I meant more people on the other side who get upset that oh no, someone points out that some people are bigoted and misogynistic
Oh
in the
yeah, no, that's what I
gaming.
mean. Like
Yeah,
the
I
reason we're reading this essay is because of people like them. Like
yeah,
I think
but
Natalie Wynn and like H all those sort of like people, like they started making stuff in 2016, like debunking like the people who were like bullying Anita Sarkeesian. And like, you
mm,
know, H guy has a whole series on debunking people who were anti-feminist.
yeah, and like I kind of like I don't really care. I understand that misogyny is not a good thing, and I don't see a problem with a woman making her opinion known about a certain topic. And if anything, it feels like it kind of proves her point, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
like
the funniest thing.
And like, I'm not gonna say that like they all are misogynistic, because that's obviously not true. But it's like, I think if you act in a certain way and getting upset at someone is like, well, okay. Like, it's always interesting when people claim they're not racist or whatever, but like when you
I'm not
present them,
racist, but
I can't. I work with black people, so I can't be
yeah,
racist.
it's like
I'm
I'm not homophobic. I actually have a gay friend, so
I'm married, so I can't be sexist, and I've got a daughter too. So
it's so true though.
yeah,
Like
and it's
when
like,
when people try to like say that they're not bigoted, they're
yeah,
either actually not bigoted or they're like literally just saying like the dumbest thing. They're just like, um, I'm not transphobic, but you know, I don't like the way that they're pushing their identities onto
their
our children.
their their agenda, their
Their
propaganda,
agenda,
the
propaganda. I'm not
trans
transphobic.
agenda.
I'm not transphobic.
No. So yeah, on the sort of continuing on with the yeah, the whole taste sort of, you know, discussion. It's at I'm just reading through the transcript to see you know, and you know, talking about how she does make a point that it's kind of not in like sort of bringing up problems that straight men don't have to deal with,
Yeah.
which, you know, I mean, fair. Like, I think it's my sort of perspective is like, I don't really care if people are like, oh, I don't mind if someone said to me, oh, you know, if like a person, a minority, basically makes a point like, oh, you have it off much easier than I do, I'll be like, yeah, I probably do. I don't see the
Yeah.
problem
Gotta
with
recognize the privilege
with
that
recognizing privilege. Like,
yeah, like
there's
there is like male privilege is a thing as well. Like if you look at like the amount of like problems that women have, but like there's a lot of types of privileges, and I think like
mm,
Hassan Arbi, I know you know, I don't know why I said the full name,
yeah,
may like said it in a very clear way, like basically like a white homeless, if you have like a white homeless person and a black homeless person, that white homeless person is gonna be better off. Like
yeah,
they are, because they have white privilege, you know, like they're
mm,
less likely to get beat up by police, sort of thing. Um, but if you have a a rich black person versus a
a rich white person.
a rich black person versus a poor, like a homeless white person, then that their white privilege doesn't, it means fuck all, bro.
Yeah,
That their white privilege isn't like it basically doesn't exist in comparison to that
mm,
rich black person because you know they're
yeah,
homeless.
yeah,
Um, I guess I think I was going somewhere with that, but I've just gotten the end of my point. So
yeah, yeah. It's so sort of, yeah, talking about various, yeah, topics of privilege and sort of going through these things, and getting to a discussion of a music video, a
ah
Jay-Z and
yes,
Beyonce video of how these they're in these various places, these places full of grandeur and art uh
and white history,
and
like
what, yeah,
exclusively white history.
yeah, and then they're, you know, and she points out that, oh, it's not actually a flex though, it because it means something more than that because of the, you know, the racial disparity between these, you know, the performers and the
Yeah,
setting.
it becomes something else because you know this sort of like the things that we like learn that we're taught in school are like classy or like you know
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah,
accomplishments of like history of like
yeah,
America or like Europe or whatever. Like
mm-hmm.
just being like, well, these things don't matter because this is cooler, sort of thing. Like this is
Yeah,
something that's been hidden from us and you know doesn't get to be in these museums. You
yeah,
know what? We're gonna go and put it in here, sort of
yeah,
thing.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, it's very interesting, and sort of talking about how, you know, it is historically black people and the art created by black people have been predominantly excluded from major high end classy museums, and so it's interesting seeing it's an interesting sort of idea, sort of and concept and image. And yeah, so she continues on talking about the statues that which we were talking about before. So I don't really feel like we need to go over that again because we talked about them. And but talking about taste and what is considered good taste of things being overly colorful and using words like gaudy and garish and tacky and that kind of thing, of how anything beyond like sort of standard like white or sort of singular colors is not appealing.
Mm.
And again,
Yeah.
that sort of ties back to what we were talking about before with the James Cook, with the Captain Cook thing, and sort of other elements of like of the racism, I guess we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess kind of similar to racism, you have like transphobia, which she starts to get into in chapter 5,
Yes,
glamour.
glamour. Yes. Um, yeah. So it's glamour, and sort of discusses various things about the glamour, and I guess sort of how that can connect to trans people. I get sort of
Yeah, well, I mean, like, being a non-binary person, I think I can speak on this because by definition, I'm trans, by definition.
mm-hmm,
Um, there is a way, like, you do want to style yourself, you want to look good,
mm,
um, and like perhaps like you just feel like, well, you know what, I want to look great, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And I guess it kind of comes across, and then like, some people they just want to lay low, like some trans people want to lay low, some people,
mm,
don't. Um,
mm,
and
yeah,
I guess it kind of is like she goes on and she says that, I think there's a quote is that, um, you know, glamour, there's a quote some here. Glamour
mm,
offers a strange overperformance of gender signifiers,
yeah,
tenuously woven layer of super femininity, fuck, which is so distracting that it successfully hides the transgender body beneath, which is um Sprinkles. I can't remember their name. I don't.
mm,
Oh, yeah, it's in there somewhere. Um,
mm,
and basically, what Natalie is going on about here is like, it's hard to look like you've got it all and
mm,
look perfect.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and like you end up with that sort of thing, and she talks about how she was like laughed out of
uh,
fucking places,
yeah,
restaurants,
yeah,
and it's
and
like, well, yeah, this is a problem, but she's also like, well, I don't want to look like I'm not strong or something. I want to look
yeah,
like I can handle this, so
yeah,
she'll leave and then cry in her car.
mm-hmm,
Like,
yeah, which isn't very good. To be honest, it's pretty
wow,
bad.
no, really? I thought that was actually really good, Um, but like you can see how like this sort of obsession with glamour is,
mm,
and by extension opulence is harmful as well.
yeah,
I mean, like,
and especially if you're at a like, because she was she's been a YouTuber for a few years,
very long
and she
time.
mentions, I believe, transitioning and whilst doing YouTube and stuff, and so she received hate for that
Yeah,
because
I mean, yeah, it's like the next paragraph of that, she's like, hundreds of strangers dissecting your voice, picking apart your face and body, clocking your clothes and makeup, digging up your past, trying to deduce the nature of your sexual pathology from the shape of your skull. Like, that's
yeah,
kind of painful. And, it depends on your own state of mind at the moment. Like, that kind of stuff is like, in some instances the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
And
Um.
yeah,
Yeah. It must be. I mean, I haven't been through that, so I don't really think I can
neither have
comment on
I.
it.
So
No, yeah, but it cannot be easy transitioning. I think it's difficult
yeah, well, I
to
mean, do you know Philosophy Tube perchance?
no, I don't.
Well, she's another big video essayist like Contrapoints.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she came out as trans a few years ago, and I don't think she posted a single video while she was transitioning.
Right.
Because if you do post that sort of stuff, like
It,
there's
you're
gonna
gonna
be
there's
people who
yeah,
come on just to troll and
yeah, and it's like, well, it must be hard for, yeah, people who are transitioning to be in the public spotlight, and it's not easy to live with, and people are always judged for incredibly minor inconsequential things, like people are judged because, oh no, they wore like the same outfit multiple times a week, or you
yeah,
know they're with someone, they're in a relationship, but it must be so much harder to be changed, to like be going through something so difficult, and
yeah.
basically changing your identity. Like that's more or less what transitioning is,
It's
basically.
more like
But it's more,
how you're treated and like
yeah,
how it was obviously she went through medical transitioning, so
yeah, but
um
it's changing who you are in a big way. I would argue, because
yeah,
changing gender is a big deal, and it's so much harder for someone to deal with that, and especially for those who are on the line and a big put and a big and have large followings, and also have people who dislike them and will use this opportunity to you know be a dick to
yeah. Well, I
people.
mean, but like this sort of like this obsession with opulence, looking like you've got it all sort of thing. It kind of the result is that you have people who aren't happy with themselves. Um,
Yeah.
because of the way other people treat them, because of the way they treat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of that, you're not just sort of, you know, and she says it perfectly in the last paragraph, where she says a lot of trans women are basically fed up with having to serve the world of fantasy all the time. They want to be
Yeah.
seen for who they are without doing any of that shit. They're fed up with glamour, they're fed up with the realness, they're fed up with RuPaul, and a lot of them are fed up with her.
Mm. Yeah.
And,
It's
yeah,
yeah. It's yeah. It's definitely a difficult process to go through, and I honestly cannot even try and imagine what it must be like, because I can't, like, that's the thing, I can't attempt to imagine people going through that,
well, yeah, it's, yeah. Um, but then I guess we head into number six, Envy, which is the title of her newest video, which you should all watch as well because it's amazing.
mm. Well,
Um,
I'll check it out after this, actually, because I
it's very long. It's a masterpiece. Probably I would say it's probably her magnum opus, but
ooh, that's very
yeah.
high praise.
Oh, by the way, if you look up Opulence and go videos, it's the first result on Google, and if you look up Envy and go videos, it's the third result on Google.
That's pretty good, actually, for a YouTube video. That's very good, actually.
Yeah. And it's an hour and 48 minutes, that one. So it's a decent
it,
length.
it's it is basically a fit, like, that is feature length.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, like
Jesus.
a lot of video essayists do make feature length stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, Envy. We're getting to the end, 'cause there's a lot to talk about. Some that has been related, and some that has not been as related. Um, but yeah, so the
Yeah,
it yeah,
I
sort of
mean,
talking about, oh, being envied is sort of like, um
it feels good to imagine being envied, but actually
but
being
the
envied is
reality is like, like I can't even imagine being happy about someone envying me. Like I genuinely think, like, I've never thought in my life like, oh, I can't wait for someone to be envious of me. Like
you've never been just like I can't wait for them to see what like this cool thing I've got. You've never been like that before.
um
Like
no,
you
well,
never just like got like a new level in a video game and you were just like can't wait for them to see what gun I got.
well, when you put it like that, I probably have.
I'd say
But
that's
I
kind
don't.
of what she's talking about.
Um, Maybe I probably have. I just can't think of anything off the top of my head. There's probably something I've definitely probably subconsciously had it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you think about it, like, it makes sense. Like, being envied, it's something that you're just like, oh, if I had this, that'd be so cool because then, like, this person will, like, respect me or something or be like, damn, I wish I had that. That's what
Hmm.
it's like. Well, it's what you, like, think about when you, like, have something that's enviable. But then in reality, it's not really great.
Right. I can definitely get why people might think like that. I just haven't really. I can't think of a specific scenario where that would have happened, but I definitely can think like people have thought like that.
Yeah, I mean, like she goes on and she's like, where envy goes, the guillotine follows, or at least vindicative taxation. She's
Mm,
like, which is why rich people know to tone down the opulence, build a nice high wall around their properties, and make a lot of
mm,
high-profile charitable donations. Um,
mm.
which, you know, can maybe be like, oh, they're a nice person, but then
Yeah.
like you look at what they're actually doing, you're like, they're not a nice person, but
Yeah.
nobody knows anything about them. So like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. No, I can't really. It's
yeah,
yeah. Um. Yeah. It's Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I guess so. Yeah. Continuing on with the envy point, talking about you know yeah, exactly, people, yeah, the
and I
people who
think
know, yeah, rich, who know what they're
yeah,
doing,
I
tone
think
down it. Yeah.
we, yeah, I think we talked about the YouTubers earlier. If you wanted to,
Yeah, that's where we're up to with this. Yeah. And what they talk about, Ariana Grande's song, Seven Rings, where with a YouTuber Todd in the Shadows
bully me,
doing a
mum.
cover of it. And Ariana Grande is apparently white. That's another very good joke, because she tans so much, it's insane. Like,
Yeah,
it's so fake. It's yeah, it's but like, it's, yeah, it's sort of, yeah, and that's a good point, because she doesn't understand to be like, okay, to tone it down. She's basically bragging about, you
yeah,
know,
but I don't necessarily think it comes across in like a different way. I would imagine mainly because if you look at like what she says later, she's just like, well, hip hop is kind of hip hop opulence is like, it's like this is our thing, like we're working together, we're gonna do this, it's like beat drop epic vibes,
yeah,
whereas when you like look at like people who are actually rich, she says exclusionary, elitist, or snobbish is gonna cost you big, and
yeah,
and
exactly.
anyone could say that Ariana Grande comes across as
As a
exclusionary, elitist, or snobbish,
Yeah,
even if that's literally what the lyrics of her songs are about.
yeah, and shoving her wealth in people's faces, and being, well, grotesque and bullying, as it is, as Natalie says in the essay. And then, yeah, we discussed talking about Jeffree Star and Gigi Gorga George.
It's I think it's Gigi Gorgeous. Yeah, Gigi Gorgeous. Um,
Yes, that is what I meant to say. I just had a speech impediment there. Um, but yeah, so and yeah, the two different the two different way that how one of them is basically comes across as like like a normal person who just so happens to be have a lot of money, and then the other side who where they say like, oh yeah, I wear Walmart for a week, and then where she just goes to Walmart, which is
yeah,
a,
you
a
know,
bad
the
thing.
American version of like Kmart,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
like Big
yeah,
W or something.
yeah. So
Do
yeah,
you know Targets have food in America?
really. Well, they have like
Yeah,
everything in Targets.
they're like a supermarket.
But
It's
then
like literally like Target's a supermarket in America.
they have like everything in like in those kinds of stores. That they sell like pretty much everything it seems.
No, they don't sell like fresh food in like Target in Australia.
No, no, but like in America, they sell like guns at Walmart. Like it's.
Yeah, well, guns are based, so.
But yeah, and okay,
I'm not gonna elaborate on it. I'm just gonna say that.
yeah.
I'm just gonna
Let's
say it.
move
I'm not
on.
gonna
Yeah,
elaborate on it.
yeah. So this to discuss going through the sort of how like it seems to happen with young rich like people who get rich when they're young don't or like people who kids who grew up in wealth don't really act like normal people, if that makes
No,
sense. Like
yeah.
they like literally in the video that Natalie is discussing, has various clips of GG acting like Walmart is an alien concept and like this is completely brand new, and like, oh no, she's hitting her shin on the trolley on the shopping cart. She's
Oh
literally gonna
no!
have bruises and it's
Like,
dangerous.
have
Like
you ever like done a trolley before? Done
it's
a
like
trolley? That's not.
also I've never had that problem here. I don't. I mean, I'm sure they're probably made differently, but I've never been like, oh man, my shins keep hitting the back of this trolley.
Oh no, the horror.
But also hitting your shins isn't very fun though. I will admit it's very painful. It is a very painful experience that I hate whenever I like hit my shin on something because it stings. I don't even know. Is it? It just hurts.
Yeah,
I
that's
guess it's
true.
because it's like very close to the bone. There's not much like it's like because
Mm.
it's basically like skin and then bone basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's kind of gross, but true.
Yeah,
Anyway, did you want to head into my favorite part of the whole essay?
of course.
Number seven, Ruin is such a good segment. I
Mm,
love it. It's got some really, really interesting sort of ideas
mm,
and philosophical
yeah.
concepts going.
Well, she becomes a vampire at this point in the essay.
Yeah, our Queen Natalie Wynn becomes a vampire.
You were a very big fan, I can tell, of the whole vampire. I mean, I was a big fan of the aesthetic. I thought it was very
Oh,
nice.
I don't think she's had a single bad aesthetic in any of her
No,
videos.
I
So
mean, I think like not to say the others were bad, but it was like my favorite one.
Ruin was probably the best aesthetic.
Mm,
Or like the black and white
mm.
blonde moment
Or
was
that the
also
black
good.
and white one was also pretty nice.
Yeah, it just looks really good when you can like do a black and white with like blonde hair or like hair that's meant to look blonde and like have that contrast. It looks really great.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, continue, and so she continue. This is a continue talking more about sort of the about history of gothic horror in novels and
Yeah,
you know
and I mean like the 19th century, like like the 1800s and like the late 19th century, like the 1800s was like that was the century of revolutions, right?
yeah, yeah, I was
Like I
when
mean
during the
there was like three French
industrial
revolutions.
yeah
Uh, the American Revolution was in 1776,
Yeah.
I believe.
Was the
Uh,
the Industrial Revolution, was that in the 1900s? Was that the 1800s?
Industrial Revolution would have been the 1900s. Well, both really.
Mm.
I believe it was the 1800s. So that's, I think, it's not really a very. I mean, the Industrial Revolution was one of the things between yeah, so it was basically 1760 to
Mm.
around 1840. So the time period we're basically talking about. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you talk about that time period, like the major the revolutions I know about was 1776 was the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
1789 was the first French Revolution. Well, the main French Revolution that people talk about. Then there was the French Revolution in 1841 and the French Revolution in 1871,
Mm. Yeah.
of which resulted in the Communist Manifesto being written. Uh, but essentially, what you see is that there's some great art analysis here from Natalie, where she
Mm-hmm.
goes, you know, um, you know, vampire novels, represented a dying world order, and they basically turned public opinion against the nobility.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
which I don't know if you can tell, kind of didn't exactly end well for them.
Yeah. I assume. Yeah. It's Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as a result, people moved out of Victorian mansions, and Victorian mansions became this sort of horror thing, right?
Yeah.
Horror,
And yeah, if you go to overseas, to European countries, there is a lot of of Victorian era mansions and houses and stuff and buildings. And I a couple years ago, like just before COVID hit, I went to Germany for a school trip, and we visited various places, and there was lots of castles that we visited, and there was lots of old mansions and everything. And we had to be super careful because it was relatively old, so everything was fragile and stuff. And yeah, it's insane the amount of it in European countries, the number of mansions and stuff that no longer are just haunt people consider to be haunted. And I will say they were some of them were quite eerie and a bit creepy at times in terms of um
yeah,
it had they had a certain aesthetic, I guess, as was pointed out in this, like the aesthetic of it all
yeah, and
is
it is
super interesting.
theoretically when you look at it, it's you know obviously it's being caused by the Great Depression when the Great Depression hit.
Yeah.
Um, and theoretically that is kind of you know, it kind of just says horror is, a genre that is not exactly pro wealth.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of the things, like a lot of the themes in horror, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the themes are not exactly the most positive towards wealth. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
monsters, a lot of horror that can be interpreted, like horror that has a meaning, not just horror that's completely trash and boring. But if you look at horror that has meaning, I don't know, would you consider you know, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared?
I'm not too familiar with that. I
Yeah.
have heard of it, but I'm not like innately familiar with it.
Well, I mean, that one had a very negative outlook on, basically capitalism in a way. If you look at it
Mm.
from a certain perspective, it's very
Yeah.
anti-consumer sort of thing.
Okay.
Um, and but it's just a horror, you know.
Mm.
And then you
Yeah.
look at there's other ones, there's a lot of things where it's very subtle, but they're making comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you don't often see horror being pro rich people, right? Like if there's a rich person
Hmm.
in a horror film, they're probably gonna die. Because their
Yeah,
house is haunted because they originally live in a mansion, so they're gonna die because their house is haunted.
yeah, yeah,
Which is a direct result as this sort of like these novels and stuff and like the past relating to like those sort of vibes, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I get what you're saying
Yeah,
about that.
and ruined opulence becomes gothic.
Yeah, and as we continue this throughout this segment, discussing the history of this, and then the decaying, all
Yeah,
this, and it creates a certain aesthetic that is very common in horror, and especially classic horror from like the 30s, and the 1920s to 40s, when horror, like creature horror, like vampires and werewolves and mummies and all that sort of stuff, a lot of them, there was like creepy mansions that they would live in, or that like other characters would live in, or would be haunted, and
yeah.
this stuff.
A-
And
And I mean, like, she goes on, Natalie, she goes and she talks about like, um, when the opulence of our age decays, will there be a new gothic aesthetic of ruined shopping malls? He says it
mm,
kind of already is because, there's
yeah,
literally shopping malls being abandoned.
yeah,
She talks about Dan Bell,
mm,
um,
you,
and
he was
I,
a
yeah,
YouTuber.
Urban Explorer.
Yes, that's how he is described as, and it's interesting to, and this part I found very interesting as well, of like this guy, and he's going through all the shopping malls, and it just looks so weird, like abandoned, like it's
It's
just
it's the whole thing with like new age horror, right? Like
yeah,
new age horror is really, really playing into that sort of like subliminal spaces sort of thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like you can see
mm,
like the aesthetics already here. Like,
mm-hmm,
like subliminal spaces, sort of like a general sense of unease as
mm-hmm,
opposed to like traditional horror. Like
yeah,
it's starting to really like take take shape. Like the new age horror is like there's something missing, but I can't place it. And
mm-hmm.
then like nothing that dramatic really happens, but like it's a different type of horror, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Um, yeah, and something about the way the shopping malls look abandoned. It seems like you could create so much great horror and like tension from this, because of the it's empty, and as we see various clips, and it's completely like decaying, and it's all falling apart and being demolished. And it's certainly very um interesting, I guess. Yeah, and how people sort of have superstitions about things being about various things being haunted, despite there being no real evidence that there is, other than a bad thing occurred here at a point in time.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting as well the kind of things that become like, have like a haunted vibe, like
Mm.
ruined shopping malls. Like shopping malls are a symbol of wealth, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'd go to at a certain point, they definitely are. Yeah,
At least this shopping mall was definitely a symbol of
yeah,
wealth.
yeah,
And like it ends up when you got that sort of situation when you're like,
yeah,
this feels empty. And I think she says like you can almost feel the souls that were shopping here,
yeah,
sort of thing. Um,
yeah,
which perhaps is suggesting that we could be heading towards a new sort of like 1760 to 1870 period,
yeah,
um, which, was a very revolutionary period. And, with increasing wealth disparity, extreme social and political sort of dichotomies forming, ostracization forming, that,
yeah,
especially in the United States, it's very, very polarized at the moment. Like, that
yeah,
doesn't even seem like that unlikely or that unreasonable. To be
yeah.
fair, if there is a revolution in the USA, it will be a fascist revolution. Um,
All right. I mean,
No, I
yeah,
mean like they have full on fascist militias in America, so
that is true. They do. Yeah.
and what do they have like for socials? Like the socialist gun clubs?
Uh, I can't really think of anything. Yeah, you've
Yeah,
stumped me with
all
that
they've
one.
got is like the socialist stuff, like the coach socialist gun clubs, bro.
Mm. Yeah. The yeah. It. Nah, I can't really argue with that. I guess. Um.
And Trump's coming back to office as well, probably. So
I mean, he's pretty much all but said, right? Like, he's
I
hinted.
I I don't think he's gonna like. I don't think he'll. I reckon he'll just be like, well, I'm gonna die soon, so I may as well go out with a bang.
Yeah. So,
Anyway,
back to this. So we're basically at the end. Like, yeah. So yeah, continues talking about these fucking yeah, this aesthetic and there's everything sort of coming. These malls are coming, yeah, being taken down and destroyed, and then it's sort
mm.
of, and what does it
And
mean? I
yeah,
guess
the
questioning.
cumulative question. But what does the crumbling wreckage of a J.C. Penney really mean? Is like that's a good question.
And she says as much, like it's a question that will haunt me, to
To
the
the
grave.
grave.
Yeah, and then yeah, we
That beautiful ending scene when she walks down the stairs with that shadow behind her into the
yeah
light.
yeah and because and it sort of and ends up and finishes it all as this character she sort of been playing the entire time, this rich I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, like as this rich like yeah, because as we mentioned earlier, she's been playing various characters throughout all this, and then she's yeah finishes as this rich woman, and then yeah walks down the stairs and is talking, and
Accept her fate.
says that she will be yeah
Guillotine.
accepting her fate as being guilty, and then that is the end of the essay, and that wraps it all up. It's I guess anything else you want to talk about that we didn't really go through as we're going through the essay?
No, I think we were very in depth. I think
Yeah,
sometimes we went a little bit too in depth.
yeah. There were a few bits where I didn't. If I'm being honest, I was at times I didn't quite. What's the word I'm looking for here? Like I didn't always necessarily get what you were saying. Sometimes I got most of what you were saying, and I sort of got the points you were leading towards. But it's something that I feel like I'm not as innately familiar with as you are. So a lot of
Yeah.
this I'm sort of a few bits I did kind of zone out a bit because I was kind of like
Well,
a bit like
that makes sense. I mean, like
because
this
it's
is
a
something.
lot to take in as well. Like this
This,
is
yeah.
yeah
I mean, this is something I do like and like focus on every day, right?
yeah
Like,
you stream
yeah, I do stream politics.
and you make videos about it, so you're a lot more familiar with this. So if
Yeah.
there might be a few times where I say something that was not in any way related to what you said before, but I tried to sort of yeah continue on with what you were saying. Um, yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything about the essay. I don't think there's anything we missed, right?
I think we got it all, yeah.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, do you want to put a rating on it out of 10? Out of curiosity, I mean, you don't have to, of course, but I
I
figured
mean,
I might as well.
I think it was a very good discussion, so I'll give it an 8.
The the discussion or the essay? I meant
Oh, the essay, I
the
give it
essay.
a
If
10.
you give it
This
a
is like
10,
my
okay,
favorite essay, except maybe Envy's better, but I don't know.
okay. This
I've
discuss.
only I've only listened to Envy. I've only listened to Envy.
I would put that video essay as an 8. It is very well written, very well made, had a lot of very interesting points, helped. I'm very open to hearing different discussions and learning new things, and I think I'll definitely be interested in checking out some of her other content to see, because I feel that I have certain perspectives and opinions on things, but I think I'm always willing to learn and be like, oh well, that or have my worldview changed, because I'm very much like I'm open to hearing different opinions and different perspectives on things, and I think
Yeah,
and so
which is the best thing.
I'm always willing to change my mind. I know there's some people who are set in their ways and don't want to change, and I think that's a major problem. And so I'm very much interested in seeing what else she has made. Yeah, is there any final things you want to say before we wrap up?
No, thank you for having me on.
That's all good. It was great having you on. I'd love for you to come back for another one in the future.
I would too, although we'll probably have to watch another video essay just because I don't know any movies. Or actually, would you be interested in the new Fresh Prince series, the drama take on the original one?
Potentially, I'll have to watch it first, and I'll have to refamiliarize myself with the original show because
I
I've
think
seen
the
the original.
original, maybe like the original's important to watch, but like I feel like the
I've seen the original show. It's a really good show, but
yeah,
it's been years since I watched it like grade 9 maybe, so which is only like a few years, but still I need to
yeah, it's
rewatch it.
fair. Anyway, I have to go. Thank you.
That's all good. I just want to quickly wrap up. We check out Brad at Brad Action on YouTube. And do you stream on Twitch, or do you
Twitch,
stream on
Twitch,
Twitch? Is
and
that
also
also Brad
Twitter,
Action? Oh, Twitter,
and
of
also
course.
Twitter, also all of that action.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening. Let's check out, yeah, Brad's various things. Check out all the previous episodes that I've done for this. Check out social medias, website, all that fun shit. And yeah, thank you all for listening to this one. A very different style of episode, but this is definitely something I'd be willing to do more of, and expanding beyond just films for topics to discuss on this podcast. So yeah, thank you all for listening to this one, and I will see all of you in the next one. Goodbye.